crisis that is facing our state, and that is our wildfire situation, which also impacts and interacts with our ongoing work to suppress COVID. We are joined by Dan Gibbs from Department of Natural Resources, Executive Director, who has been on the ground fighting the fire the last few days. Stan Hilkey, Department of Public Safety, Executive Director. Dr. Alexis Burakoff, Medical Epidemiologist at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I know a lot of Coloradans are worried about the quality of the air, what it is safe to do outside, how what many residents see or smell in the air affects our health, and Dr. Burakoff will have those answers. First, on coronavirus, we're at 53,631 positive cases, 261 cases today that are new, that are added. We have 1,858 people who've died with coronavirus, 1,736 who've died from coronavirus effects in our state, and we solemnly remember everyone that we've lost, all of them, our friends, our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers, our aunts, our uncles, our kids, and each one will live on in our memory as a loss from this greatest pandemic in a century. But overall, 10 of the last 14 days, we've had a downward trend. Coloradans are doing the right thing. They're wearing masks, just as we're wearing masks here. They're social distancing, avoiding large groups and parties. And that's not the easiest thing in the world for people to do. It's also not the hardest thing for people to do. Previous generations have been called off to war. In my parents' generation, my father and mother lost many of their high school classmates called off to war in Vietnam. In my grandparents' generation, many served in World War II, and far too many didn't come back. What we're asking here is continued patience, continued forbearance. Now is not the time for large get-togethers and parties. And that's difficult in its own right. It's not going off to war, but I in no way mean to demean how hard it is when humans are fundamentally social animals to forego some of those parties and events, especially those rites of passage, large weddings or funerals or remembrances. There's, just like everything we're doing in life, there's a way to do them safely, right? Small groups in person, a virtual component, outdoors with social distancing. There's a way to do everything that we treasure in life, but it's not the same way that we did it last January. And Coloradans are succeeding in doing things a different way, right? It's not doing nothing. It's not cowering, in your home. It's doing what you value, what enriches your life in a way that is safe. And yesterday we had our lowest positivity rate for coronavirus testing in Colorado at 2.18%. And that is a direct result of you wearing masks in public, of you avoiding large gatherings, staying home when you can. And that's especially welcome news as kids return to school across our state. But this will only keep up with the good news as long as we keep up our exceptional efforts that have been very successful so far. Mask wearing, social distancing, avoiding large groups, washing our hands with soap regularly. Simple things that truly Coloradans are excelling at. And that is reflected in the numbers, which is also reflected in our stronger economic recovery thus far than many other states that have been harder hit. Now, as you know, we are all in wildfire season in Colorado. The entire state is in a drought. We have dry and hot weather over the next few days. When I was in Grand Junction a few days ago, looking at my weather bug, it said 101, 103, 100. These for each day going forward. This is unfortunately the ideal environment for forest fires to spread. A few days ago, I visited the Incident Command Center in Eagle County, as well as the Incident Command Center at the Mesa County Fairgrounds in Grand Junction to meet with the emergency responders on the ground. Thank them, of course, for putting themselves at risk to protect our communities. Truly, our entire state is grateful for our firefighters and first responders. As of yesterday, the Grizzly Creek Fire is the #1 fire priority in the entire nation. We're receiving and deploying resources from all over the country. As of Monday evening, the fire has grown to 27,000 acres. The top priorities are, of course, protecting residents and structures and reopening Highway 70, of course, a critical transportation corridor in our state, which remains closed with flames literally up against the highway in several places. The Pine Gulch Fire also saw a large amount of growth last week. As of Monday, over 86,000 acres. That makes it one of the top 4 largest wildfires in the history of our state. Because of the nature and where it is, there's some natural barriers and rocky areas in the southeast that we hope will hold to prevent further expansion to popular areas, and then along the Roan Creek Road, efforts to protect the structures and buildings there. The Cameron Peak Fire, 15 miles southeast of Red Feather Lake, started last Thursday, mostly on federal land, as all of these are. Grizzly Creek Fire, mostly U.S. Forest Service land, some BLM, some state, some private. Pine Gulch Fire, mostly BLM land, some private, some state. Cameron Peak Fire, also mostly federal land, 14,018 acres, and hot, dry conditions, along with some wind in the area, has been driving rapid fire growth. Finally, the Williams Fork Fire started Saturday, 15 miles southwest of Fraser, also mostly federal land, 6,627 acres, 0% contained. We see smoke from a lot of these fires, but this visual smoke from that one is highly visible on Highway 70 in Summit County. The combined impact on the air quality is profound from all of them, and of course it's a very visible form of heavy particulate pollution as well. These fires are challenging. They're challenging in any time. And it's on top of the challenges of the pandemic that we continue to face in our state, across the country, and across the world. So this is in many ways yet another challenge, compounding with some of the COVID issues. Wildfires add strain to our already burdened healthcare resources, can provide supply disruptions for PPE or testing equipment. Critical first responders are sometimes diverted and also require testing, as more people are understandably and rightfully getting tested because poor air quality can often cause COVID-like symptoms, respiratory issues. And if you are experiencing respiratory issues, please get tested, right? It may be the poor air, or it may be COVID, or it may be the flu, but it's important for yourself and your family that you see and determine whether in fact it's COVID. We have quick, free, easy testing sites at the Aurora Sports Complex, Water World, Pepsi Center, the Citadel in Colorado Springs, in and out in 15 minutes, couple-day turnaround. And then there's over 50 community testing sites across our state, covid19.colorado.gov. You can look at the interactive map to find one near you if you're experiencing symptoms. But we expect that there'll be more demand for testing because, again, the way that the poor air quality in the fires affects some people can lead to the same type of cough or respiratory difficulties that are the initial symptoms of COVID-19 before it can worsen and cause hospitalizations. Lastly, of course, we're concerned about the impact of the wildfires to our economy. This is always a challenging situation in our state. We've been successful enough, thanks to the hard work of Colorado residents, in suppressing the virus to the extent that we've had much closer to a normal tourist season in western Colorado than we thought would have been possible a few months ago. Many communities are slightly down, but nowhere near the 50 or 70% decline that many might have projected a few months ago. They're doing it in a safe way. People are wearing masks, they're doing social distancing, outdoor events, but obviously with the break-in access on Highway 70, and of course the poor air quality, it is going to have a difficult environment, in particular for the tourism industry over the next week or two. But despite these challenges, Colorado is resilient. We are no stranger to floods and fires. We have the very best people on the ground and in command, applying the latest technology to reducing the risk of loss of life, to monitoring, and to aggressively fighting the fires that we're presented with. I'm grateful to Director Stan Hilkey and his team at Department of Public Safety for their efforts to proactively prepare for this year's fire season. We knew that there would be a challenging fire season this year, and so we were able to make sure that our public safety partners approach this season with foresight, diligence, created contingency plans to adjust for the challenges presented by coronavirus. I'll update you on some of those. And frankly, we're all safer because of this outbreak, because it's just as it's important to not miss a step in fighting the fires. We want to make sure that we don't do so in a way that leads to another peak of coronavirus because of the influx of firefighters and personnel from across the country. We also have Dan Gibbs with us today. Dan is the Executive Director of Department of Natural Resources, also a volunteer wildland fighter who just returned from Grizzly Creek Fire. He's going to share about his experiences battling the Grizzly Creek Fire in the time of the pandemic. I also am grateful to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, Dr. Burakoff, a medical epidemiologist, who will share with you how our testing capacity and public health response are up to this challenge. And of course, first and foremost, on behalf of all Coloradans, I want to express my gratitude to the approximately 2,000 men and women who, like Dan, are battling fires across our state as we speak, risking their lives to protect our communities, protect our way of life. I want to acknowledge the local emergency management personnel, the nonprofit volunteers, the support staff working around the clock to support our efforts at fire suppression. We are truly indebted for the service and bravery of so many who run towards the smoke and towards the fire to keep us safe. With that, I'll turn it over to Dan Gibbs, the Executive Director of the Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for your leadership on your efforts coordinating the response to wildfires throughout our state, and thank you also, Director Hilkey, for your amazing team as well. As the Governor said, I'm Dan Gibbs, the Executive Director of the Department of Natural Resources, and I originally got involved with fires being a wildland firefighter because the community I live in, Summit County, was really heavily impacted by the bark beetle epidemic that we were seeing in Summit County with thousands of acres of dead trees. So, and then when I was a legislator, I worked on the side as Summit County's wildfire mitigation specialist and have kept my certification as a Type 2 wildland firefighter for over 13 years now, and have fought fires in Colorado and California. And being a wildland firefighter, I think, definitely gives me an important perspective in managing our natural resources and how it impacts our water, our environment, and ultimately it affects, Coloradans, whether you live near active fire going on or not. So I wanted to give you some of my personal perspectives from being on the Grizzly Creek Fire from the last 4 days. I got out last night, so I was there Friday through yesterday. As the Governor mentioned, this is the nation's #1 priority fire. There are homes and structures at risk. Its main thoroughfare, of course, the interstate highway is right there. We also have critical water and natural resources within Glenwood Canyon too that we're very concerned with. But over the last few days, I've really had the pleasure, and it's been very proud to serve alongside wildland firefighters from around the country. I was deployed in Division W, known as Division Whiskey, which was on the northeast side of the fire, working on structure protection for homes and buildings. Specifically, I was assigned to a Type 1 fire engine, working with a crew from Eagle River Fire District. Our main job was to protect a neighborhood and create defensible space around homes. This included creating and enhancing fire breaks, clearing brush, removing trees, setting up fire lines around houses. So that kept us, very busy. But, fighting fires during COVID-19 is definitely very different from my experiences from firefighting in the past. First of all, everyone is all dispersed. So in the past, everyone would be based in a fire camp, for example. And now, everyone is based, within their own unit, their own pod. And the divisions are totally separated. We're kind of like, in your own little pod that's separated from all other firefighters. Food supplies are brought in, once a day to you. Normally you have morning briefings where you hear from the incident commander and head of section chief, the head of operations, and so forth. And that's done in person. Well, now it's done all via radio communication, so you don't have to be all together. Let's see, I was really impressed with some of the precautions that were made. Even though we were all at Spike Camp when it came time for food, there was a water truck brought in for hand washing. So we were able to, stay as, clean as possible and stay, separated from folks as well. I know you have probably questions about Glenwood Canyon. I was there a couple of days ago, and from my experience there was still active fire on both sides, the north and south side of the fire, but there are also parts of Glenwood Canyon that look like a fire was never even there. So it really just depends on where you're at within Glenwood Canyon. Also saw nonstop helicopter bucket drops throughout Glenwood Canyon, really working hard to put out the fire and not put firefighters' lives in jeopardy with, especially with fire, but also falling rock that's occurring throughout the canyon as well. For local communities, many of you know it's exceptionally dry in Colorado. We're in the drought, so the low humidity is definitely, and high temperatures are definitely creating a very challenging fire behavior right now. We need rain. It'd be great if we had rain. But for communities that are facing fire, it's really important for individual families to have an evacuation plan, know where to go if you're being evacuated. You should have an evacuation kit in advance, and definitely listen to local authorities on any evacuation orders. In closing, I want to be sure to express my deep appreciation for being able to serve with men and women who help fight wildfires throughout the country, and a shout out to Engine 24 and my division whiskey supervisor, Richards. Thank you.
Thank you. We're also joined by Director Hilkey, Department of Public Safety. Thank you, Director Gibbs. Director Hilkey.
Thank you, Governor. Again, my name is Stan Hilkey, Executive Director of the Department of Public Safety. Three of the divisions in the Department of Public Safety usually engage in wildfire activity. We have the Division of Fire Prevention Control, Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management, and the Colorado State Patrol, and I'll explain how each one of these divisions engages in these types of events. Even though we're in this pandemic and it is unprecedented, we have planned all year long for the fact that while during the pandemic we would have other crises like wildfire, and we even drilled on that earlier this spring. So we've been proactive to prepare, and one of the things that we have done is to try to create an increased emphasis on early detection of wildfires and an aggressive initial attack action to reduce the likelihood of large fires from happening and long duration of fires. In that effort, we've actually encountered and detected 68 fires that were previously undetected in this calendar year, and we're able to refer them to jurisdictions to get extinguished before they became large fires. Governor Polis, through an executive order, also directed the transfer of funds from the Disaster Emergency Fund to the Wildfire Emergency Response Fund that allowed us to be able to partner with local communities to be aggressive in that initial attack. One of the areas that funding has assisted with is that we received funding for an exclusive use contract for a large air tanker fixed-wing aircraft to be used in Colorado solely. Since that contract was put into effect at the end of June, that aircraft has flown 27 missions on 15 different fires in Colorado, delivering roughly 82,000 gallons of product. In wildfire, it is an interagency partnership among local, state, and federal entities. The Division of Fire Prevention and Control is the lead state agency in Colorado for wildland fire, and they have been connecting with the incident management teams on all 4 of the fires that the governor described. Most of those fires, or all of those fires, are predominantly federal land, but each of them has a small component of state or private land. It gives us the opportunity to work with the incident management teams and to be able to sit at the table and help them identify incident priorities and create objectives to work towards those priorities. The Department of Homeland Security, or the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, another division within public safety, also supports wildland fires by supporting county emergency operations centers, leading in consequence management of fires and long-term consequences and short-term consequences. And it includes supporting evacuations, sheltering operations, recovery missions, historic and cultural site impacts, and critical infrastructure impacts. The Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management also has people assigned specifically to each fire. And then finally, the Colorado State Patrol is often involved in most fires with regards to assisting local law enforcement in helping to evacuate and to create traffic control points so as to make the area safe for firefighters to be able to work. During this pandemic, it has given us unique challenges in the development of the 2020 Wildfire Preparedness Plan. We knew that COVID-19 would cause us some interesting challenges. We therefore developed strategies to address these concerns. For long duration fires, we changed how we manage fire camps, and it was described to you by Dan Gibbs. Some of the things that he experienced are things that we knew would happen and have been successfully planned for. We want to make sure that firefighters are able to arrive at an incident with the ability to be self-sufficient and for multiple days, staggering when and where and how firefighters eat and sleep, increasing the number of hygiene stations available, cleaning supplies and equipment, trying to limit them from gathering together in large groups for food and sheltering and water. We also have, through the governor, allocated federal funds to the state's disaster emergency fund to be able to deploy National Guard and other testing resources into the large fire camps should they need testing, and the ability to provide testing to the firefighters that are on the fire and have the appropriate protocols for people that might be experiencing symptoms. Our partners in the Division of Homeland Security and the Red Cross and the Division of Insurance have also developed sheltering plans that minimize the impacts of COVID-19 for those people that might get evacuated. We want to make sure that we don't follow the same old playbook where we evacuate people to school, gymnasiums, and churches, etc., where they would be housed in congregate fashion. We instead want to house them in non-congregate shelters wherever possible so that we have people put into hotel, motel rooms or college dorms or other places where we can minimize the risk of COVID to evacuees. So we've done a lot to eliminate risk, to try to eliminate risk and try to mitigate it. One of the things that I also want to highlight, in addition to the air tanker that I spoke about, there is a large contingency of aircraft in Colorado right now. At one point on the Grizzly Fire, there were two very large air tankers, 4 large air tankers, 2 or 3 single engine air tankers, and multiple helicopters all working that. That is a lot of crowded airspace for a fire, but that's indicative of the fact that it is the #1 priority fire in the nation at the moment. The amount of money that the state has spent on wildfire suppression so far in the calendar year of 2020, those numbers it's only going to be an estimate at this point. The numbers are not finalized till usually at the end of the year when we have time to do that. But we do know that we've spent approximately $10.5 million on state suppression costs, and it does not include the state assistance to local fires before a fire became a state responsibility fire. In comparison to that same time frame through August 16th of 2018, the state had 18 responsibility fires versus 9 this year, and we spent over $40 million in 2018. So we're still ahead of 2018. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the governor and be available for questions.
Thank you. Dr. Alexis Burakoff.
Good afternoon. As our state manages the wildfires that are bringing smoke and ash to our communities, we suffer from the dual respiratory threats of COVID-19 and smoke. Wildfire smoke generates the pollutants of ozone and fine particles, both known to cause respiratory symptoms, including watery eyes, scratchy throat, cough, and for some, difficulty breathing. And as we know, many of these symptoms also overlap with what is seen in COVID-19 illness. You may be wondering if your symptoms are due to wildfire smoke or due to COVID-19. There are some symptoms of COVID-19 that are not typical of wildfire smoke. For example, fever, chills, and diarrhea. However, if you are having respiratory symptoms or symptoms that you're not sure if they're due to COVID-19 or to wildfires, we would urge you to speak with a healthcare provider. And as Governor Polis already emphasized, please also get tested. Some of the things that you can do to maintain your health during this time are to track air quality in your area. For example, you can download the app Air Now from the EPA to check how the air quality is in your community. For example, in Denver today, the forecast is supposed to be in the orange range, meaning unhealthy for persons sensitive to smoke. This includes young children, teens, older adults, and people with lung diseases such as asthma or COPD. People with these conditions are recommended to not exert themselves outdoors for prolonged periods of time when air quality is not good. And if the air quality gets worse, to please stay indoors. CDPHE also puts out air alerts when necessary. We issue these alerts when air quality conditions represent a threat to Coloradans' health and well-being. This morning, CDPHE issued wildfire smoke advisories for parts of western, northern, and central Colorado. Residents in these areas, again especially the very young elderly and those with history of respiratory and cardiac illnesses, are urged to stay indoors and limit their exertion at these times. In addition, there are also advisories in effect for the Front Range and Colorado Springs. You can sign up for air quality alerts and check the status of wildfire smoke and general air quality at colorado.gov/air quality. During times of higher pollution, you can also consider making cleaner air for your home, especially if you have a condition that makes you sensitive to smoke. For example, if you have central air, you can set it to recirculate indoor air to circulate indoor air and run continuously, because bringing in outside air can make the indoor air quality worse than outside. You can also change the air filters in your air conditioning using a high efficiency filter. Replacing your filters every month during fire season can be helpful. Please remember to keep your windows closed to keep smoky air out. If you have respiratory problems such as cough, difficulty breathing, or sore throat, as I already said, please consider getting a COVID test or speaking with your healthcare provider. And please, during this time, don't forget the basics for protecting yourself from COVID-19. Avoiding crowds, wearing a mask in public, staying at least 6 feet apart, washing your hands, and of course, staying home when you're sick. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for that informative presentation. If there's some medical questions, we'll be happy to direct them to you as well, and we appreciate your thoughtful guidance for Coloradans who are wondering about what we can do and shouldn't do outside. You know, as we contemplate the fires, there's only so much that our brave first responders can do, and that's why I'm asking all Coloradans to be extra careful about fire safety right now, given the fact that Colorado is exceptionally dry and exceptionally hot. Sometimes something as small as a cigarette butt or a spark from a vehicle, a campfire, or fireworks can destroy thousands of acres of property, including people's homes, and cause road closures that can cost our economy millions of dollars. For those of you who live in the wildland urban interface, now is a better time than ever to mitigate your property. As a member of Congress, I toured in the aftermath of many fires in northern Colorado and saw the enormous difference it makes for a home that did mitigation, created a barrier, taking down trees, seemingly spared completely, miraculously, next door, completely destroyed, simply because of the mitigation work that was or wasn't done by those homeowners. It's too late to do that mitigation once you're under warning for evacuation or there's a fire nearby. So please, you might have been putting it off, now is the best time. Do that mitigation, create the defensive barrier. You could very well be saving your own home. Given what's at stake with the wildfires here in Colorado, the dry and hot weather, we're issuing a 30-day statewide ban on open fires across the state. 3 of the 4 fires that we're currently fighting were likely caused by human activity, and the hot, dry weather is making fire behavior extreme. Rapid spread, already taxing our resources to fight fires, and we need to do everything that we can to prevent new fires from starting in the first place. This ban will be in effect across our entire state, prohibits campfires, fireworks, and other open sources of ignition. Of course, people will still be able to do home barbecues, public grills, camp stoves, and approved covered fire pits. Those are all permissible. Every county in western Colorado has this in place, with the exception of Ouray, Delta, and Chaffee, which now will fall under this order. And many counties have additional steps, more comprehensive fire bans. But this statewide measure on fire bans will provide clarity of message. And since fires are often between counties and between jurisdictions, this will help reduce all of our risks. As we've said before with regard to coronavirus, and Coloradans have been successful, now is not the time to party. We add to that now is not the time to have campfires or fireworks, right? We can enjoy our great vast outdoors in a safe way. You can bring camp stoves if you need to. You can use public grills. But the danger in campfires and fireworks is simply too great. And something that, if we truly treasure our great state, we will forego during this 30-day period as we address an extremely hot and dry conditions in Colorado. We also need to continue to build upon our success with COVID-19. And our success is only as good as we can maintain our safe practices that lead the nation in keeping the virus in check. The virus is here. There is still community spread. The moment that it has an environment that allows it to spread exponentially, it will. It's the same virus that we've dealt with, that New York and Texas have dealt with, that France and Spain and Italy have dealt with. And it's on us to continue our successes, to keep our distance from others, avoid large gatherings, to wear our masks whenever we're around others, to wash our hands frequently, and of course for at-risk Coloradans, older Coloradans, people in their 70s and 80s, to continue to stay home whenever possible. And of course, all of our responsibility for both our own health and the health of our loved ones, as well as community health, to get tested if you have symptoms, right? Free, quick, and easy testing sites, in and out in 15 minutes. Water World, Aurora Sports Park, Pepsi Center, Citadel in Colorado Springs Mall, and over 50 free community testing sites across our state, covid19.colorado.gov. You can also call your doctor or practitioner, community health clinic. There's a variety of ways that free testing is available if you're experiencing symptoms, so that you can determine whether it is something that is a potentially great risk to you, your loved ones, or is a byproduct of the fires and the air quality or other pathogen. You know, we are all in this together, whether it's coronavirus or the fires. We will get through this. And I want to thank every Coloradan for being safe, for being smart, for avoiding activities that can start additional fires, for protecting yourselves and your families from the spread of coronavirus by taking the simple steps of wearing a mask, avoiding gatherings, keeping your distance from others, and washing your hands with soap regularly. Thank you, and we'll be happy to take some questions. Yes?
Question for you, Dr. Burakoff. So that 2.18 positivity rate, what do you credit for being able to get down to that number?
No.
And also, do you think that it's something we'll be able to maintain with the fall coming on, flu season, schools opening, et cetera?
So the positivity number, which is really a function of two variables, the number of people tested and the number of people who are positive. So by increasing testing, we've helped drive then that number. We have averaged 10 to 12,000 tests a day. with days where it's higher, days where it's lower, but we've been able to maintain that. It's free, quick, and easy for anybody who wants it. And yes, the number of people who convert with a positive result is lower thanks to the success of Coloradans in wearing masks, avoiding large gatherings, and avoiding social interactions and keeping their distance whenever possible. I'll turn it over to Dr. Burakoff.
Yeah, I would just agree with everything that was said. The more that we can continue to maintain social distancing and masking, the more we'll see those numbers hopefully continue to be low. I think it's really too hard to guess what the impact of things like school openings might have on our numbers. We think that, the guidance that we've released is going to make school as safe as possible, and so certainly my hope is that that wouldn't be a huge driver, but too hard to say what will happen. And as Governor Polis said, please continue to do the things that are working.
While there are many more children in K through 12 education that there are at our residential higher education facilities, I think we all have an extra degree of concern about those who live in congregate living in institutions of higher education. We know how effective this virus is when people are living together at spreading. I really applaud our colleges and universities for taking the steps they need to lock down dorms early, to identify cases early, expand testing. It's going to be a challenge, just as it is, of course, in a far more deadly way at our senior housing facilities and nursing homes. It'll be a challenge wherever people live together in close proximity. And that's an extra challenge on higher ed that our K-12 system doesn't have, where kids return to their home every day.
Hello, Governor. This is Vinny Dutch.
I can't hear. Could you repeat the question? We're turning up the volume.
Okay, is this better, sir?
Let's take another from the room while we fix that. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Governor, I have a quick question on the fire ban.
Yeah.
Does the fire ban also include shooting on public lands? That ban?
Stan?
I don't think that it will be, and we'll look at that. It's still in the progress of being drafted. But I think the real relevant point is that we want people to take the fire ban seriously, just like the executive orders that happened during coronavirus and COVID-19. We can't write a ban that bans everything that's risky. We're asking the public to self-identify all of the different types of activities and the different types of things that might start a fire and cause a fire. But right now that's under development.
And whether you're hunting or shooting, don't use exotic or illegal ammo that can increase the fire risk. Be careful, be cautious, and follow safety practices even more diligently than you typically would to prevent the risk of fire.
Yeah, hello, Governor. This is Vinny Dutch, Director of Bloomberg News in Denver. Regarding the presidential election voting by mail, have you seen any specific evidence in Colorado that the post office has been removing mailboxes and loading neighborhoods or other post office interference? Thank you very much, sir.
I was satisfied that the Postmaster General issued a statement that they would delay any closures or removal of mailboxes till after the election to remove politics from this equation of what needs to be done to save the U.S. Postal Service. We have a long-standing tradition of successful implementation of mail-in elections in our state. There's been universal mail-in ballots since 2013, and long before that, many Coloradans, and even a majority of Coloradans, voted by mail securely and safely in our state. Almost 3/4 of the people who vote by mail use drop boxes rather than the Postal Service to return their ballots. Secretary of State Jenna Griswold has an effort where they're offering additional drop box capacity to counties, and many counties have taken advantage of that, and I encourage the counties that haven't to avail themselves of that opportunity to provide secure, free drop boxes for residents, and I expect that more than the usual 70-75% will likely use drop boxes this year, especially those who missed the cutoff date for the mail service, but we continue to work to ensure that our U.S. Postal Service for delivery of ballots and return of ballots is safe and secure in the state of Colorado.
Governor,
Governor, it's David Clue at Denver 7. I was wondering, your 10 p.m. last call order is set to expire this weekend. Are you going to allow that to happen, or are there plans in the works to extend that order?
So on the one hand, we know that we can't return to normal. Like so many things in life, we value our ability to go out at all hours, and certainly many 24-hour restaurants continue to be open all 24 hours. But we also know that a social environment akin to a nightclub or a late night at a bar where people are inebriated provides an ideal environment for the virus to spread. We don't just know that anecdotally, we know that with several reports from across our country and across the world. So with lower numbers, I'm hopeful that we can make progress on expanding the opportunity for people to enjoy themselves, but at the same time, with the virus present, we're nowhere near a situation where we can return to living the way we did last year without giving the virus the opportunity to expand exponentially in our state, destroying our economy and costing thousands of lives.
Governor, Steve Saban with 9 News. A broader question on that same topic. You've got encouraging data right now, and a lot of people wondering when you might consider lifting some of the restrictions out there. The last call, obviously, but also indoor visitation at nursing homes. So what is the magic number for you to start lifting some of those restrictions? Do you have a metric? And if so, why not share it with the public? And on wildfires, one question, you mentioned 3 out of 4 were human caused. Can you verify which 3 and tell us? I believe one of them was, they were still investigating. We're trying to figure out which one that is.
Yeah, I'll go to Director Hilkey on your second question to ask about the likely causes of the 4 fires. Of course, those are the operational assumptions about the likely cause. We either have issued or will be issuing very shortly the indoor visitation guidelines for senior residents. If it hasn't been issued yet, it will be in the next couple days. We also have had a very robust outdoor visitation program that's been in place for some time now. It's important in this crisis, while of course protecting the physical health of those who are most at risk is critical. I mean, you have, when people are in their 70s and 80s, you have rates of 1 in 3, 1 in 4 having to be hospitalized, and many of them don't make it out. Of course, we need to do that, but we also need to support the mental health and social needs of our seniors that are living in congregate care facilities. Outdoor visitation was a big step forward, but we recognize that not everybody, particularly those who are ill, not everybody can successfully engage in outdoor visitation, or some might simply prefer indoor visitation. So if those guidelines have not been issued, and we're happy to respond to you on that, they will be in the next few days. I've already reviewed them.
Stan Hilkey here. I'll talk about the cause of fires. The Pine Gulch fire that started in Mesa County and burned into Garfield County, it is believed most likely that is due to lightning, as there were lightning strikes recorded in the area at the time of ignition. The Grizzly Creek Fire is believed to have started from perhaps something dragging on the interstate causing sparks, which would make it a human-associated fire. And the other 2 do not have any recorded lightning strikes in the area where the fire started, and it's still under investigation, but are believed by investigators to have been human-caused. In addition, there have been other fires that have been started and have been put out or are in mop-up phase, the small fires that don't get a name that are also in that same category. They're under investigation but are believed to be human-caused, which is consistent with year after year. The highest percentage of fires that start in Colorado are man-made.
Governor, Marion from Minnesota, not sure I heard an answer on what you're saying to the last call order.
Yeah.
To review it, are you planning to modify it in any way so that businesses get
Marianne, did you have a second question? Let's go back to Marianne. Marianne, on your first question, I understand it's frustrating for folks who want to know more earlier, but we always make those announcements, usually, ideally the day before, sometimes the day of, about the path forward on a particular executive order. I think at this point I can confirm that in no place in America is the nightlife ready to resume in a way that it existed last year. That being said, I think that the progress with the virus, just like we revisit every executive order, will hopefully allow for some changes. But those are always prepared. That executive order is not prepared yet for us. It will be. They're working on it. And of course, we'll be talking about exactly what's in it, ideally a day before the expiration. Sometimes it's the day itself. We'll give Marianne a follow-up question if she's on. Marianne? Well, we always value local control and appreciate a state that has many additional variances above the state standard in areas that have low virus presence. I would say around the nightlife-related concerns, our concerns are the greatest in the areas that have college students returning from across the country. And of course, that means, as you indicated, Fort Collins and Boulder, but it also means UC Colorado Springs, Denver, Mesa, all of our residential colleges, by nature of the congregate living and by nature of the age group and demographic of the folks, and by the fact that many are returning or coming from other areas of the country with much higher presence of the virus. That heightens our concern about both the nightlife side of things in the short term, and of course also the private parties that can be just as effective at spreading the virus. And so certainly a lot of those public health departments are on the alert about doing what they can to make sure that students know their responsibility in this.
Charles Ashby from the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel. So Sheriff Hilkey, as you know, last year the legislature passed a bill that gives your aerial firefighting center the authority to implement some sort of technology to track drones and detect that over wildfires. I'm wondering if something like that has been in place yet. What's the status of that? And I'm also wondering if you're getting any reports of people flying drones and shutting down air traffic on those fires.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate the question and the former title. This year we have fared better in that the drone activity over fires has not been as great as it was. And we do still get detection reports of drones, but we haven't had the ability to set up and do any detection work. As you know, that remains a really difficult challenge. But what I am grateful for is that it seems to have been less of a problem, and it seems like that people are getting the message to fly their drones less over fires. It still does occur, and it still is a problem, particularly for the people that are managing fires, because they have to ground their aircraft when it does. And when they ground the aircraft, that presents a whole big challenge of problems. Everything backs up. And and some of those aircraft are designated, particularly in the helicopter world, to be able to drop product or water near the area of firefighters as a safety measure should they get in trouble as well. So the use of drones over fires remains a big concern, and we continue to watch it very closely.
Last question from the room. Any questions?
Josie?
Governor, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how you guys vet the private companies that you use for coronavirus testing sites across the state. I know that Mako Medical had some problems down in Colorado Springs, and they've had problems in other states. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the other companies too were looked at, and if you're confident that these companies will be able to get the job done.
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Burakoff talk about that. I wish we had Emily Trainer here from our state lab who could address that. But any of the tests are validated by our state lab if we're going to use them. So there's a validation process that makes sure that testing works, and we are currently working on validating several additional tests. Look, Of course, as we expand testing and make it more available, there's going to be hiccups along the way. The surest way to avoid errors would be to not contract for testing and not do testing, and that's not an acceptable alternative. So we are aggressively working because of the backlog of the national labs, LabCorp and Quest. I understand they've gotten the time down from the 8 to 10 days. It might be more 6 to 8, but that's still not a helpful time frame for people who are tested or for the public health response. So we are doing everything we can for 2-day turnaround, 3-day tops. The guarantee, the contract with Mako, 48-hour turnaround. Now, there's sometimes an additional day of transit. You know, just like with all of the private lab partners, where they deliver on budget, on time, we will expand those relationships. And for contractors who fail to deliver, who are over time or over budget, we will phase out those contracts. So we are working with a variety of partners to rapidly scale out testing. I expect some growing pains along the way, but that is far better than doing nothing and continuing to languish with this 6 to 8 day turnaround. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Burakoff, do you want to talk about the validation of tests?
Oh, I was actually just going to say, you know, I have not personally been part of that process, but I'm happy to try to get back to you with some specifics because I know my colleagues have been. So.
Yeah, it's more the state lab that is doing that, so we can have you talk to them. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you.